Council meeting for February 11th, 2019. Mayor Riggle is out of town tonight, so you all are stuck with me. Roll call, please.
Oh, sorry. Mr. Jones?
Here.
Mrs. Keller?
Here.
Mr. Browning?
Here.
Mr. Rohr?
Here.
Mr. Hellinger?
Here.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Here.
Motion to excuse Mayor Riggle.
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Keller, second by Mr. Jones. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes. Item number 2 is our invocation given tonight by Pastor Scott Teevee from the Delaware Bible Church, which will be followed by our pledge of allegiance. Stand. We can do first.
Okay, let's pray. Father, we just want to pause right now this evening and thank you for the great city of Delaware, Ohio. Father, we recognize that through the goodness of your providence, you have given us a fantastic community to live in, and just a great place to raise kids and enjoy friends. And Father, we just thank you for it. Father, I pray tonight for the city council, and just pray that as they seek to do the business fairly, forthrightly of the city, that you would give them wisdom. We know that this is a place that's growing quickly, and there's a lot of challenges with that. So, Father, I just pray that you give them wisdom and discernment as they seek what is best for the common good. Father, I just want to lift up tonight to the Delaware City Police Department and just say thank you for them. And Father, just pray as they preserve law and order in our community, Father, that you would protect them, help them, give them the right decisions to make in the quick moments that they have to make them. And Father, we pray that each one would return home safe to their families each night. Father, bless this meeting. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Pastor Teevee. Item number 4 is approval of the motion summaries.
Would you like me to read all of them? Approval of the motion summary of the regular meeting of council held on January 14, 2019 as recorded and transcribed. Approval of the motion summary of the regular meeting of council held on January 28, 2019 as recorded and transcribed. And approval of the motion summary of the joint meeting of council and the Delaware City School Board meeting held on January 28, 2019 as recorded and transcribed.
Move for approval of the motion summary.
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Keller, second by Mrs. Jones. Mr. Jones. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes. Item 5 is the consent agenda. Can you read it into the record, please?
Item A, acceptance of the motion summary of the Planning Commission meeting held on January 16, 2019 as recorded and transcribed. Item B, resolution number 19-05, a resolution appointing members to various boards, commissions, and/or committees and specifying the term of the appointment. And item C, established February 25, 2019 at 7:30 p.m. as a date and time for public hearing and second reading of ordinance number 19-02, an ordinance amending chapter 529 of the General Offenses Code of the City of Delaware.
Wish of council.
Move for approval of the consent agenda.
Second. I have a motion by Mrs. Keller, second by Mr. Brown.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes. Item 6 is time tonight for letters, petitions, and public comments on anything that is not on tonight's agenda. So if you're here to comment on something that's not on tonight's agenda, this is the time for that. Sir, anyone that wishes to come forward at this time? Seeing none, we move on to item 7. Committee reports. Mr. Jones?
I have none.
Mrs. Keller?
I have none. Thank you.
Rob?
I have none, thank you.
Sure.
I have none.
I have none. I just have to report that this Thursday is the Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission, and Mr. Holman and I will be in attendance at that. Okay, we have two presentations tonight in item 8. The first is a presentation of the flag to the Delaware Police Department from Delaware Bible Church. Pastor Chidi, I'm assuming it's you.
Yeah, it's me. So our church, Delaware Bible Church, is taking a special week this week to really show appreciation and gratitude to our Delaware City Police Department. And we are working with the police department to do some special things for each officer and just show a special amount of gratitude to them. And it would be a special honor to us if we could present a couple of flags. These are the American flags in the thin blue line motif. We have two of them. We would love it if we all could fly those here at City Hall and also at the police department this week as we're having that special recognition. I'd like to recognize also the committee of folks that have put this together. So if you guys would stand, Brad Harris, our assistant pastor, Marvin Hintz, our former senior pastor, Joe Martin, and Karen Restore. So if it's okay, I'd like to bring these up and present these. For the city. Chief, thank you so much. Thank you for all of
Thank you.
Sure, Thomas.
I'd really like to thank Delaware Bible Church for doing this, and they've kind of taken us under their wing this week. It's been really nice. It's been one day, but and also the flags, the thin blue line flag. And if you don't know what that represents, it's really simple. It's that your law enforcement is the thin blue line that stands between good and evil, or order and chaos. And we understand what that means because a year ago, and really the reason for this is, a year ago yesterday, the 1-year anniversary of the deaths of Officer Morelli and Officer Jordan in Westerville. And that struck a little too close to home. Year to date, it's 7 officers killed in the United States by gunfire, just by gunfire this year alone. So we realize it's a changing job. And we understand our need to be part of this community and to interact with this community and do the things that allow us to communicate. But the bottom line is it's still a dangerous job. And we stand in that gap between good and bad, and we do that. And when I say that, the thin blue line isn't an isolation thing. We know that when we stand together, we stand strongest. And when we're with our community, we're part of this community. We are strong together. And so I really appreciate the support and the presentation, and we'll apply that with pride. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Item B is a presentation on the West Hall Drive traffic management.
Good evening, members of council and public. Purpose really is to provide an update on the West Hill Drive traffic concerns that have been presented to the city over numerous years, and just to give you an update as to where we are with that and potential course to move the issue forward. So just very little background. Ravines at Stratford, which is the West Hill Drive we refer to as Ravines. Residents did contact the city in 2017, officially asked for some formal meetings together to discuss their concerns over neighborhood traffic. A working group was formed involving all 3 neighborhoods directly in that immediate area. Parking and Safety Committee heard at least 2 times various testimony from both the citizens and from staff. There was a pilot study proposed for some temporary work down there to see if we could manipulate traffic and maybe make things a little bit better on Hull Drive. And the Parking and Safety Committee at that point voted really to advance the issue because maybe it was a little more global than just Hull Drive to this full council. So the image up here, what you're really seeing is to the north is Wesleyan Woods, really constructed in the mid to late 60s, early 70s. The yellow roads are the collector streets, neighborhood collectors in there. So that's when Wesleyan Woods was constructed. Then across the road in the mid 80s, the Delaware Square Shopping Center followed construction. Then in early 90s, what was originally the Drexel development, and we now refer to it as Ravines at Stratford and Stratford Woods, came into play, and the first thing that went in was the shopping center where Walmart is in 92, followed by Ravines at Stratford, which is West Hill Drive, Between 94 was the first year the first phase was constructed, 96 it punched through to Liberty Road. Then south of that, you see Stratford Woods, started in 93 with Hawthorne, and that punched through in 96 also out onto Liberty Road, as well as Beach Drive. And then to the east of that, you see 2019, the Coggins Crossing project is on the way right now. So circled right there is Ravines at Stratford. The numbers, starting from the north, 1503 is the average daily traffic on Somerset or Cotswold at Liberty Road, based on one of the recent counts. Hull Drive, you can see 2,981 on that particular day. 600 vehicles a day at Beach and 1,289 vehicles per day at Hawthorne at Liberty Road. The concept of the pilot study was try to reduce the 2,981 trips a day by preventing access from the plaza back onto Hull Drive. So the arrow really is significant, showing trying to get it out onto 23 and keeping it on 23. There's a lot of speculation about once it gets onto 23, will it just go back to Hull Drive? Some speculate it'll go south through Hawthorne. There's a lot of different speculation, but the purpose of the pilot study was to see what would really happen if we did prevent exiting traffic from the plaza onto Hull Drive. The pilot study would have been a temporary initiative for an active traffic calming. It really just would have prevented you from exiting from around where Chipotle is back onto Hull Drive. It would have been a temporary project, 60 to 90 day duration. The plaza owner did approve it as a temporary measure, not as a permanent. Trying to work with the city in terms of trying to aid the process through to see what could happen. And then actually, if we did a pilot study, you'd actually have actual data. We would be able to count once it's in place, would know really what people's preferences and routes are going to be once the pilot study was moved forward. So the pilot study, I think there was some misinformation that it was a permanent change, and it was only to make a temporary change to see what could happen if an active change in traffic pattern was initiated. The concerns that came out of that were there's additional changes along 23 that we'll discuss here real quickly, that even if we made a change, those could in turn impact the results when we make more improvements on 23. And in a sense, maybe even negate those type of improvements. There's significant public concern over limiting access on any public road. That a public road should be open to all traffic movements at all times, to all public, regardless of where they're coming from and going to. And we heard that from the public. Traffic would just be redirected to another neighborhood was a concern, whether you're living north in Wesleyan Woods or south in Stratford Woods. There was some concerns over just taking trips from one neighborhood and putting it to another neighborhood. And then I did want to note on the bottom that this issue goes back as far as 2002, when council considered this issue, coming up on, close to 2 decades ago, where the same type of discussions happened, same type of discussions on diverting traffic to other neighborhoods, and in the end, there was no action taken back in 2002. So I talked about additional improvements that are scheduled or planned in the future along this 23 corridor. Starting from the south, that's the new full access intersection with the new plaza. There'll be a full signalized access, full movement access there. Next to the north, that second red dot is reconfiguration. I like to call the Wendy's signal, where those two signals on Old Stratford Drive, and that will be combined to a signal and have some access movements there. The next dot to the north is at Hull Drive, and our US 23 access management plan through ODOT eventually closes off the median right there to left turns from 23 onto East Hull or onto West Hull Drive, really based on a safety concern that if we start having an accident history of those left turns, then the access management plan would suggest that you prevent those left turns from happening. I think we did mention back in our parking and safety meeting, we don't currently have an accident history there for the left turn movements. There is accident history along this corridor, but not because of the left turn movements at this point. The next red dot up, the last one to the north, is improved intersection improvements that will also be constructed with the Coggins Crossing project, and those are primarily signalization and a realignment of the left turn lanes, so they're opposing each other, north and south, to make the intersection a little more efficient. That was required as part of the project through ODOT's approval. The last project on there is the dash line to the east. That's in our current transportation plan, and that's the extension or creation of a public route between 23 and Stratford Road through the south side of that shopping center. So those are all improvements that are planned or could be made along that corridor in the future. So when we talk about, should we wait on a pilot change on Hull Drive, there is some reasoning behind there's significant other improvements that are going to happen along here, and they could all end up in some form of readjustment of traffic. So I talk about active traffic calming measures. That's what the pilot study is. The top left shows an example of a prohibition. It's a right in, right out movement right there. We were talking about a complete prohibition or a no exit from the shopping center onto Hull Drive. So it's very active. You're forcing traffic to do something else, to go somewhere else. Do not enters, one ways, no exits, no left turns are all examples of that, what I call active or intrusive traffic calming that would force you to either no longer allow movement or to make a different movement than you're planning on. On the bottom left, I just wanted to show that there's also what has been talked about are the traffic speed bumps, which we're still not just a real big fan of in the city, but those ones have the cutouts for your emergency service vehicles to be able to traverse without having to slow down. Passive calming measures would be things like a traffic calming island in the middle of the road, which effectively reduces your lane, forces folks to slow down a bit because it increases the perception of risk. The picture on the right shows something similar where you bring out your edge lines, you narrow your pavement, travel pavement, you add double yellow line. Again, it decreases your perception of your safe lane width, forces drivers to react and maybe drive a little safer, a little slower. There's a traffic calm neighborhood movement. I just really stole that off the internet from another neighborhood that does look at creating a set of parameters to try to calm traffic in certain neighborhoods, and they call it a traffic calm neighborhood. In the bottom left, you see the dynamic speed feedback signs, which we have piloted, and we've already shared some results regarding those things, but there is a perception from the public that it's, in a sense, having like law enforcement out there when when at least the sign is actively representing your speed back and maybe forcing you to slow down. So those would be the passive calming measures. The other ones that limit your movements are active calming measures. I just wanted to show this real quick. After our last parking and safety, we did go out and look at similar residential collectors, just to give you some background of the other roads in the city that may be subject to the same types of concerns at the Hull Drive. And I want to also say Hull Drive, Hawthorne Drive and Wesleyan Woods, folks have all spoken up to in terms of their concerns over traffic impacts. So you can see on this particular one, it's just your average daily counts. Second one on top is West Hull Drive. In this particular month in January, we were counting, you can see Hull Drive is a little lower. So we'll probably repeat these counts again in spring to see where we are, but it just gives you an idea of other streets and where they are in order of most to least traffic. So you can see up around the Hull Drive, there's several of the roads that have significant counts also that we've had concerns presented regarding traffic. The next one we're looking at is the 85th percentile speed. And you can see Bueller Drive has the highest at 33 miles per hour, followed by Bell, Cheshire, Cobblestone, and Cotswold. The yellow on each slide is just the top 5 roads out of 16 roads in terms of speed, and Hull Drive is third from the bottom there on this particular count at 29 miles per hour, which is consistent with what we've been measuring on West Hull Drive. This one looks at your peak hourly flows. What you can see on the top, again, is Pennsylvania, Bueller, Cobblestone, Bell, and Lexington have the highest peak hours. And some of those occur at 7 to 8 a.m. No surprise, that's when people are going to school and going to work. And some occur at 5 to 6 p.m. The outlier is Bell Avenue, 3 to 4 p.m. But that is certainly related to Delaware Christian School being right there and when their release time is. But you can see at the top, 276 vehicles per hour is the highest peak hourly flow. And that happens on Pennsylvania Avenue, certainly related to the school being up there. And again, you can see the other roads, as high as 276 and as low on Fieldcrest Drive, down to 64 vehicles as a peak hour. The last slide we have is the accident rates per 100,000 trips in a mile of road. And these are, we looked at the 5-year accident history on all these streets and just boiled it down to these accident rates. And you can see on the very far right column, that's 0.86 accidents per 100,000 trips on a mile of that street. So again, you see your top 5 streets that have the highest accident rates. The reason I show you this is not to say we shouldn't do anything on Hull Drive or any road, but just to give you an idea of why it's important as we consider this issue. That's really a global issue here in the city. There's a lot of roads that have peak hour traffic or 85th percentile speeding or accident rates. So what we're really recommending at this point, and we talked about this, I think, a little bit in the parking and safety, is we may want to consider delaying the pilot initiative of actively preventing movements out there, at least until some of those major improvements, new signals are put in on 23 and traffic has a chance to learn that and reroute to what drivers may feel is a more efficient route. And then maybe after that, it might be appropriate if we want to look at an active change or at least experimenting and seeing what happened, maybe that would be an appropriate time to pilot that. So that would be best maybe later this year or even into next year once traffic's had a chance to stabilize. Second, more importantly, is I think we are in a position where we could maybe advance some guidance documents on what we consider the passive improvements. That's the striping, the usage of the speed back signage, islanding, things like that. There's more passive measures too than just what I've showed you. But those are things that are maybe more applicable to all the neighborhood streets that I showed you, all those neighborhood collectors, that any one of them could probably come out and say, hey, look, we like those things too. So to look at some guidance documents that we can bring back to this body and say, these are the things we think might be applicable on these streets under these certain parameters, also gives you a chance to understand what those things may cost and how we may fund those. And I've been looking at a number of traffic calming policies from other communities across the country, and they're all very in line with how we do the same type of thing. Let's look at the problem, let's get some statistics, let's get public testimony. Is the neighborhood behind it? And then is the neighborhood willing to pay for all of it or pay for part of it? Those are all, that's a pretty typical model, I think, across the country in dealing with traffic calming. I would expect we'd bring back the same type of thing, only with something a little more specific in terms of the cost of the type of improvements we could make, not just on Hull Drive, but on any number of these streets. And as I said in the bottom, review all the neighborhood collector streets against these traffic calming policies and bring some form of report back to this body for maybe further action. So I'm really suggesting we split the ability to do these passive measures and bring forth some guidance documentation on that, and let the more active physical barriers or prohibition of movements, let that set a while until we can stabilize some of the traffic along 23. And that's, I wanted to keep this brief so we had some chance to some dialogue, and I know there's a couple of folks in the audience that may want to say something regarding this. I know it's just a presentation. That was the intention of it tonight. And my recommendations are as they stand to be able to bring something back regarding passive movements and delay the pilot. And I can answer questions at this point if you.
Questions, comments?
I got a couple. Hey, Bill, are any lines painted on Hull Drive now? I don't think so.
Other than like stop bars or
Okay. All right.
crosswalk type things.
Okay. The only, I like what you're talking about. The only thing I hate seeing is things getting lost. So outside of the Hawthorne, the traffic light at Hawthorne and 23, are there other things we want to anticipate? So, okay, after that happens, do we start counting cars again and seeing where people are going? So are there other things we want to look at and make sure we want to see the dust settle? But yeah.
I would definitely, we would want to continue to count on Hull Drive, Hawthorne, and Cotswold, Somerset, because when those lights do go in, I anticipate some change. But I'm afraid that until that shopping center really starts to develop out, we're not going to know how much change really is going to happen. I don't think we're going to create hundreds of more trips coming down to go to that. You'll probably see trips instead of going to maybe Meyer or the Westfield, maybe start going down here. So there'll be new trips in Delaware going to this part of town, but not necessarily bringing more trips into town. But with that said, I really think that we need to be very diligent in our counting so we can know what's happening specifically on Hawthorne, because the traffic study does have some estimates of what might happen on Hawthorne as that site builds out. I personally think maybe they're a little light, and as we've seen on Hull Drive, construction of a shopping center on a road tends to attract a lot of trips, and I think we'd be blind to think that if Carbon's Crossing was building out fully with several good commercial and business developments, we're not going to see that attract new trips movements from Delaware, maybe diverting from one area down to this area. So we have to continue to count. So I wouldn't stop counting at all. So we have good information as it grows. Does that answer your question? Okay.
But what kind of timetable are we talking between you coming up with some proposals and us actually implementing something? My concern is we're going on 2 years since
Yes.
they first came to us, and at some point, I'd like to see us do something.
I'd like 3 months to research a little bit more what we call passive guidance policy and bring back an actual document for you to consider that would be an extension of our traffic calming policy. That would say these are specific measures that we could put in under these circumstances. For example, 2 policies I read today said that you have to have 7 miles or 8 miles over your posted speed limit, your 85th percentile speed, before they consider it. Ours is 5 miles right now. Many communities are 10 miles per hour. So we may want to adjust that. I mean, I showed you the one slide that showed more than half those roads are at 5 miles per hour or more over the 85th percentile speed. That would suggest that they're all eligible for some form of traffic calming. Why I want to be cautious of this is what I don't want to do is suddenly inundate the city with $250,000 of improvements now that our policy says, well, we should be doing those things. So it's not a creative policy to avoid doing the right thing, but we want to be cautious and understand what are the implications of certain measures. If we set up what those thresholds are, we'll know, well, what streets could this apply to. That's the first thing. The second, again, is to really wrestle with, do we expect neighborhoods to come up with a share of funding if we're looking at providing calming into that neighborhood? Is that appropriate? And the third and important one is just to wrestle with the policy of, is it fair to reduce traffic in one neighborhood at the expense of increasing traffic in another neighborhood? I know that's something that we've heard throughout this discussion, and we may hear again tonight, that balancing traffic may seem like a fair thing to do, but it depends on the road you live on. If you're the one receiving more traffic, you may stand before this body and say, it's not a good solution. So really provide that guidance document back. And if we could have 3 months to bring that back and with something to really consider, I think that would be favorable, that we could act on that, and actually on a road like Hull Drive, that'd still allow us to actually put some passive measures in place yet this year, so it doesn't sit, as well as start to address some of the concerns on Hawthorne and Cotswold as well.
What passive measures would we be considering on Hull?
What I would recommend is the striping, the narrowing of the lanes. It's a wide road right now. We could add the double yellow line. We could add the edge lines, which still allows parking on both sides. But effectively, you're going to create almost what looks like 10-foot lanes. This could give the perception of risk in a narrow lane, and people tend to slow down by 3 or 4 miles per hour in that condition. Also, the dynamic speed feedback signage we could consider as a possible measure. And one of the ones we hear about is building islands in the middle of the road. Now, that's a very expensive passive measure. It does have a tendency to slow people down entering and exiting these collector roads, because they can't, for example, come off Liberty Road at 35 miles per hour and take that corner at 30 miles per hour, enter the neighborhood. It forces you to slow down when you have these entrance features. There's also the concept of, do we want a signage program or package that says this is somehow represents it's a neighborhood. You could just come from a arterial road into a neighborhood, and the one sign you saw said it's a traffic calming neighborhood. Does that really mean it's kind of like a neighborhood watch? Does that change criminal behavior because it says neighborhood watch? Well, does a traffic calm neighborhood change driver behavior by saying that there's a reason for it? I can't say yes or no that it would make a difference, but those are the types of things that we could do, and I think that'd be the extent of it. I'm not proposing at this point that we would put speed bumps in that neighborhood for a number of reasons. It's more of an active measure. It's certainly one that our safety forces they may be tolerant of on a pilot basis, but not the kind of thing we want to proliferate, I think, through the city.
To me, one of the reasons why this is tough is because I don't feel like we have a target of what the problem is that we're trying to solve.
Right.
I saw a bunch of numbers and statistics, and what I'm seeing is no significant crash history on Hull, no significant speed issue, just a lot of cars.
Right, and it's a good point, Councilman Keller. Passive measures aren't going to necessarily impact your volumes. They're there to maybe try to reduce your speeds, maybe 2, 3, 4 miles per hour to what might be perceived as tolerable. but only an active measure. A prohibition on a left turn or a turning movement or preventing someone from entering that road is the only way to really reduce the volume on that street. So passive measures are there to try to calm the traffic and make it a little bit more tolerable in the area. But if you're fundamentally concerned about traffic volume, they're not going to address traffic volume.
Do we know on Hull how many cars are turning left out of the shopping center and how many may be turning left from 23? When we look at that number, do we know where those cars are coming from?
Yes. I don't have that off the top of my head, but we do have those numbers. It's significant. The traffic coming out of the plaza and turning left into Hull Drive is very significant.
Okay.
Amount of traffic. Probably close to 80% of the traffic on going west on Hull Drive comes from that one movement right there. Most of the traffic that comes in off 23 turns into the shopping center.
So I'm going to go out on a limb and say I absolutely appreciate the neighbors that have come and brought this concern to us. As a member of the Parking and Safety Committee, my vote at this point would be, I think we do nothing. Because we don't always have to take an action when a complaint is brought forward. I think that we all have the feeling that we certainly want to look at what we can do, but I'm just not hearing of any solution that will actually make a difference in terms of the volume of cars. And I feel like we're kind of just meandering around what are we actually trying to do here. So that's my perspective for what it's worth.
I think one of the things that we've been wrestling with on not only this particular collector road, but others as well, is the ongoing debate about enforcement versus speed control and how to do that in a way that balances the resources we have as a police department and the tolerance of residents on a particular road to deal with what they perceive sometimes as speed, sometimes it's not. I think the passive traffic calming approach is viable, and I think it's considering all of the complaints we get about speed control on Hawthorne and Executive and Lexington, and all of those collectors, and some of the work we've already done on Lexington, which was on Bueller Drive, we did experiment with some striping there, but I think actually has helped. I think there's perhaps some merit to just thinking about this, because as you know, Lisa, when we get the complaints about Cobblestone and these other places, invariably we call the police department. The police department comes out, they do their work. Obviously we can't be there all the time, and then we engage the residents to try to do that volunteer approach where they get the speed control camp. We measure the speed and whatnot, but ultimately we're not able to kind of slow the traffic down. And it obviously doesn't address the volume, but I think it does, as Bill indicates, when you put those objects out there, whether they're lines or whether they're medians with landscaping, it does naturally cause you to slow down a little. I mean, it I think can be effective. The question is what the cost is. So,
but I guess the problem I go back to is, are we trying to fix the speed or are we trying to fix the number of cars? If we're trying to fix speed, we've got like 6 roads ahead of Hull. Right,
and you might I think that's why you want to consider the policy, because I think, but that's not a bad thing. I think if this pilot could work, whether it's here or another road, and it works, it's more effective than constantly going out and doing the speed enforcement, the signs, trying to enlist the neighbors. That's a good thing, I think, because this is just an ongoing issue in this community and so many other communities. Is the design of these roads were done at a time when we were designing roads much wider, and the design of the road has as much to do with the speed of the cars. It's not volume; it's just speed, I think. I mean, unless you want to just change that. So, I just know that the Hull Drive residents have been not just recently, but in the last several years, this has been an issue. So. I don't know, it could help address not just on this particular street, but on some of the others. The question is, what's that cost to put in, striping? Obviously there is a cost associated with that, but there's also a cost associated with us with police, with the resources that we use to go out and try to enforce it, so.
Councilwoman Keller, I think it's a combination of the two, because when you have the volume that they have, and then you take the 85th percentile that's behaving within parameters, you have 15% that aren't. And that 15% of the bigger number is more cars. So I think that's part of the problem.
Yeah, I'm a little concerned with not doing anything simply for the fact that I've chaired parking and safety pretty much ever since I've been on city council. And when people come to us with a problem, whether it's Bueller Drive or Cobblestone or the school over there, we always try to do something to mitigate the situation. You know, we may not be able to do everything they want us to do, but if there's something we can do that'll make it a little bit better and make the residents feel a little safer, I'm in favor of doing it, provided that it's within reasonable cost. One thing I would ask is it possible we could make this a 60-day turnaround on this, only because I'd like to see us get something back sooner rather than later, because then we're going to discuss that, and it's going to take time to make that happen. So is there any chance we could speed it up just a little bit?
I can do that.
Okay. Any other comments from council?
What are we speeding up?
His report back to us on what our options are and what our policies, citywide policies should be on traffic. He's going to get something back to
Okay.
us. And this is not a public hearing, and I don't want to turn it into one, but if there are some members from the Hull Drive group that would like to come forward and comment on what Bill has proposed tonight, we'll entertain those comments. As always,
Sure. My name is Jim Bauer. I live at 176 Hall Court. I am the president of the Ravines at Stratford Homeowners Association. First of all, I have to say this has been an ongoing process for 2 years, and we appreciate everything the city has done to hear our concerns, working with the engineer's office. A lot of proposals have been put out there, not all great. Some have been really good. I just wanted to say volume is the concern on our street. I do agree with Mr. Homan that we need to get in front of this, and there needs to be a policy put in place and calming effects. One thing about the stats that I think it's important for council to understand is we take close to 3,000 cars a day. And yes, there are other neighborhoods that take close to the same. We have 61 homes on our street, which means the majority of cars are coming off of Liberty or coming off 23 and going directly to the other end, not making a stop in between. Where the other subdivisions have 250 to 1,000 homes in a residence, which means they're traveling, a lot of them, entering off a main artery to get to their residence. So I think volume is volume, but the volume we're seeing is on a shorter distance road. It's not even, I don't even know if it's a mile long, what we have. I believe speed is being held down because of the volume. You're not seeing the speeders because there are times when cars are almost bumper to bumper coming through, especially after work or after school. At the intersection where the stop sign is at Hall Court and Hall Drive is not unusual to see 7, 8, 9 cars backed up each way at the stop sign just to make a turn, which is pretty high for a residential area. It's not like coming out of a subdivision, say Hayes Colony out on Pennsylvania Avenue, waiting to make a turn off a residential street onto a main artery. So we do have the flow, and I think stats are good as far as speed, but I think sometimes stats cannot always tell the whole truth. So I know one of our other members have been in contact with the city manager's office about this problem, and they discussed calming devices. possibly islands and striping, and talked about possibly a pilot program, and whether our residential neighborhood could be a pilot program to see whether these items are work for the city. So I just want to thank everybody for taking the time, listening to our complaints, and what we have to say. This is, like I said, I've just picked this up in the last few years. I've dealt with it throughout my career, my previous career I had, where I worked for the city of Delaware, so I'm familiar with it. And it's not going to get any better. Southwest quadrant with Sawmill Drive or Parkway going through, that's the area of growth right now for Delaware. And I'm hoping the city stays ahead of the curve in helping to curb this and control and maybe help reduce the volume, because like I said, 3,000 cars in that short a distance is different. It's different to have 3,000 cars a day on a mile stretch of road compared to 3,000 cars a day on a road that is 2.5 miles long. That's just not safe at crosswalks, and there's a lot of other issues. So I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Any other comments on this?
Good evening, council and spectators. My name is Dustin Nana. I live at 206 Silver Maple Drive, which is back in this area of town off Liberty. And I use Hull to access the shopping center and to go back to my home. My concern is if we stop left-hand turns out of Hull and then later 23 closes median access from there, you're saying that everybody that lives in my quadrant of town must now, they can access it from Hull, but then they have to go all the way out 23 and then around down to at least Cotswold, Somerset. So you're going to take a road that already has nearly 2,000 cars in traffic, and I mean, it's not going to go down. If you close access to Hull, that number is not going to go down. So my concern is, how long until we're sitting here talking about the same thing for Cotswold, Somerset? That's pretty much all I have to say about it.
Anyone else? Mr. Farina, we'll look forward to hearing from you in April. Thank you very much. And thank you to the residents from Hall Drive for working with us on this. We'll keep playing on. Item number 9, consideration of a liquor permit trucks.
For item A, Food Truck Depot LLC at 59 Potter Street, Delaware, Ohio, 43015, permit class D5.
Chief, I don't know which one.
Assistant Mayor, members of council, good evening. We have before you a liquor license Trex request. We're following the typical modus operandi of presenting these to you and having these passed. This is for the 59 Potter Street location, which I commonly call the Cargo Depot. The Cargo Depot has been purchased by Mr. Paul Rockwell, who is in the audience right now. He is converting that property into the Food Truck Depot. And as you know, we are at the maximum number of liquor licenses, certain types of licenses that can be acquired in the city with our current population figure. For the public's benefit, the Trex process is the opportunity to bring in a liquor license from another community in Ohio if we are at our capacity. And that is what we're doing here. This is, again, the opportunity to allow our city manager to sign the Trex document saying that this is an economic development project. Mr. Rockwell's project will create no less than 6 jobs, as well as help revitalize an area of town that we've been concentrating on for a little while. I can tell you we've had no less than 20 visits to that building trying to find a prospective buyer for it, somebody who can do something good with it. It also allows our city manager to sign the waiver of hearing document that comes back to us after that Trex document is processed by the state. So this is a dual measure here that kind of speeds up the process a little bit for the applicant.
It's correct, Vice Mayor Schaefer, members of council. We conducted a background investigation on Mr. Rockwell and his presumed application for his liquor permit. We found nothing that would substantiate a legislative basis for an objection. We'd recommend authorizing the city manager to sign off on the form when that comes in.
And Vice Mayor Schaefer, members of council, you may recall that with the Trexes, we basically try to pass both things at once so we don't have to come back and have council vote on the liquor permits. So basically we put the motion in there in italics, so it'd be easier, but you'd combine both steps into one to speed it up for the applicant.
I guess if it was okay with council, could we hear from Mr. Rockwell? I mean, this is an exciting, as Sean indicated, this is an exciting project that he's involved in, and one of the areas that the Comprehensive Plan Steering Committee has identified is needing addressing some challenges is the east side, and in particular this area. So I'd be just interested in knowing more about your project and what you plan to do there, because I think it'll be catalytic.
Well, I have to move in on this. I just want to say thanks for putting this together. You guys have been great, and we're looking forward to having a fun spot on the east side, a little unique project. There's not really anything like it in Ohio, and we're excited for it. So if you got any questions or...
So tell us exactly what you're going to have there. How's it going to work?
So the depot building itself is going to be a bar, a restaurant. We're putting restrooms in. We're adding a parking lot outside. We're going to re-landscape the whole place into like a beer garden, park-like setting, and then we're going to have spaces to park food trucks around the lot. So you come in, you get a beverage, you go out, order food from your whatever food truck you want the food from. We have a coffee shop inside, a bar, small little bar with probably 20 tabs. Small little kitchen inside, which will be like an indoor food truck kind of thing, but not a food truck. So that's kind of what we're doing.
You use name and address.
Yes,
Okay, could you give us your name and address for the record?
Yeah, Paul Rockwell, 7491 Calhoun Road, Ostrander.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sounds like a neat concept.
Thank you.
Certainly something we don't have here yet, so great. Any questions for council? And what's the wish of council on this?
I move to approve the Trex and not request a hearing before the Liquor Commission.
Second. A motion by Mrs. Keller, a second by, is that you? Mr. Brown.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes. Passes.
Thank you very much.
Could you read on 10, please?
Ordinance number 19-01, an ordinance for Ohio Health for approval of a final development plan for medical office building on approximately 3.31 acres on property zone B4 PUD, General Business District with a planned unit development overlay district, and located at 2295 West William Street, US 36.
Mr. Rathman?
Mr. Vice Mayor, members of council, we did present this at your last meeting. This is the second reading of a final development plan. To date, through Planning Commission and so far through City Council, has been non-controversial. I know the applicant is here, and we would recommend approval at this time unless there's any questions or concerns.
Yeah, I'll come forward with any comments.
Good evening, council. My name is Mike McKay, Director of Design and Construction of Ohio Health, 3535 Olentangy River Road. We're here last time at the last meeting. Don't know if there's any new questions. Be glad to help answer. Certainly excited to get this project moving and get started.
Any questions for the applicant? Thank you. What's the council, you want to move on this tonight or take the third reading?
It's in my ward, and I asked, kind of put it out there on Facebook if anyone had a concern. I only received one comment back, and they said they'd rather have this than a fast food place, unless it was a BB Bop, and I have to agree. So I'm okay with that, and hey, if BB Bop is listening in the second ward, looking forward to you coming.
Is there a motion there?
So I move to suspend the rules requiring 3 readings on ordinance 19-01.
Second.
We have a motion by Mrs. Keller and a second by Mr. Helms. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Move for approval of ordinance 19-01.
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Keller, second by Mr. Hellinger.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes. Ordinance passes. Could you read item 11?
Resolution number 19-06, a resolution supporting the approval of the Delaware Knox Marion Morrow Solid Waste Management District Plan Update dated November 14th, 2018.
So this is an update of the Delaware Knox Marion Morrow Solid Waste District Management Plan. And we have with us tonight the Executive Director, Jenna Hicks is here, and I believe Doug Sams is here, who chairs the Policy Committee, and they're here to provide council with an overview. I think council's aware of some of the issues the city of Marion and the city of Delaware had over the last couple of months with regards to our recycling program and some action that the Policy Committee took at one of its more recent meetings to try to address that, and they're here tonight just to talk about the plan in general and that in particular. So.
Good evening, council. Thank you for giving us a chance to come and kind of give an update of where we're at with our plan. As Mr. Holman said, I'm Jenna Hicks. I've been with the Solid Waste District as the director for the past 5 years. We are going through our process outlined in Ohio Revised Code of updating our solid waste plan, which is required every 5 years. And right now we're in the final phase of that, where we ask all of the municipalities within our 4-county district to pass a resolution, hopefully an approval of our plan, but obviously you don't have to approve it. Our time frame to do that started December 12th and it ends March 11th. So we're asking everybody to pass a resolution within that time frame. Doug Sams, who's with the Delaware Health Department, he is the chair of our policy committee, so I've asked him to kind of come, introduce himself, go over the process that we took to get to this point, and then I'll kind of follow up with some of the challenges that we've met and what we're trying to do to address them, and then we can answer any questions that you may have.
Hello, Doug Sams, Delaware General Health District. Like she said, I am the policy committee chair. Over the last 18 months, we've worked to update our plan, which outlines how the solid waste will be handled in our 4-county district for the years 2019 through 2020, 2024. We've worked with GT Environmental to develop this plan, and several committee meetings have been held, and a 30-day public comment period and 2 public hearings during this process. The policy committee is actually made up of 7 members from each of the 4 counties and 1 member at large. We have a commissioner, who is Barb Lewis from Delaware County, the mayor's representative, Joe Bullis, Township Trustees Association, Ron Buller, Health Commissioner's representative, myself, an industrial representative, Tom Price, a citizens representative, Paul Wise, and a public representative, Jane Haas. The plan includes some new initiatives such as curbside and recycling center grant program, education focused on reducing contamination in the recycling stream, and looking at options for holding more regular household hazardous waste events. The plan includes many of the same programs as before that are included but not limited to recycling drop-off locations in the township, robust education programs, recycling and community events, yard waste composting locations, and the municipal tire program. The plan also has to meet the Ohio EPA's approval and help to meet the state plan with their 9 goals. The district funds program through and current operations through contract fees. And as of December 12th, 2018, the contract fee was $6 per ton, charged to all solid waste facilities that were designated by the district to receive the solid waste from the district. The contract fee remained unchanged since September 30th, 2008. Contract fees are anticipated to remain unchanged during the first 5 years of life. The contract fee has the potential to increase to $7 a ton in 2026 and then remain flat for the remainder of the planning period. The fee increase will be discussed during the next plan update in 5 years. So our next step to finalize our plan is ratification, which started on December 12th and would end on March 11th. We are asking that each and every municipality, no matter how big or small, issue a resolution approving the developed plan during the designated 90-day time frame. If you would take no action at all on it, that counts as a no vote. To ratify the plan, we must have a yes vote from legislative authorities representing a combined population of at least 60% of the district's total population, as well as 3 out of 4 of the largest cities, which Delaware City is one.
So that's the process that we've had to go through to get to the point where we're at today. And I'm sure that you're all aware of right when we finalized the plan, our policy committee, November 14th, passed a resolution to approve the plan. And I think that's about right at the same time when your bids came back for your curbside collection, which did include the increased fees. Sims Brothers services your program as the recycler. They also service the City of Marion's curbside program as well. So that was brought up as a concern of how is the district supporting curbside programs? What can we do to be more supportive of those? And due to how the Ohio Revised Code is set up, we have timelines. So once that resolution was passed by a policy committee on November 14th, we had to start our ratification process within 30 days. So we weren't able to go back and change anything, which would have been the ideal scenario for everyone. What we did is we called a subcommittee of various members of our policy committee. Mr. Holman was there with the City of Delaware. We had representatives from the City of Marion as well as various members of that committee, as well as EPA, because they are a large member of approving our plans. We had to make sure whatever we were going to do would meet their approval. So out of all of that, it's not an ideal situation. I would probably say everybody here would agree. We were able to increase our budget for our recycling grant program. So we doubled that budget. That was within what EPA said we were able to do. We couldn't change in any of the programmatic things that were in that. So that subcommittee did make a recommendation to my full board, which my board, we have the 12 commissioners. That's who I have to report to. The 12 commissioners of my 4 counties represents my board. And they did approve a resolution to double that budget. So we did kind of a lot more money. What that will allow for is to help match EPA grant funding. So our money wouldn't be enough to buy a recycling truck that you guys might need in the future. But if we can obtain EPA grant funds, our money could be used to match that grant. So it's kind of garnering more funding than what we can have available in our district. So that is the first step that we are moving forward with because of the timeline. We have to move forward with that. And then in 3 years, we're going to be starting this process again of having our meetings and our planning meetings where, I think that discussion needs to be more prevalent of, can we focus more attention, more budget towards curbside programs? You guys have 1 program out of 19 in our district, so it is a large portion of the recycling that's taking place in our district. So this is kind of a stopgap, I guess, and it's really just a timing issue of when your bids came in versus when our plan was approved. Definitely worthy of discussion, which hopefully can happen during our next planning process. So this will hopefully, for the next 5 years of our planning process, we'll hopefully make it through But that is kind of where we've been, where we hope to go. Some of the other things that this process has kind of brought to light to myself is maybe building a better relationship with the district. We do have a staff person in each of our counties. So our staff person is Jennifer Way Young with the health department, who does the education, local contact for the county. So building that relationship, having more of a contact with Mr. Ferrigno's office to see what we can do education-wise as well. That's been built into that contract for 2019 to build that relationship with the largest city in all 4 of our counties, not just Delaware, but all 4 counties. So if there's any questions, we'd be more than happy to answer any of the questions. And I forgot to turn my alarm off on my cell phone. I'm sorry. It's my kid's bedtime. But I'd be happy between Doug and I to answer any questions if there are any.
Do you need to remind yourself of your kid's bedtime?
No.
I never forget that.
Any questions for council?
Just the willingness of the district to work with us on this issue, the timing was not good. We are we'll be following very closely, have been involved in Delaware County's initiative to actually establish, expand their transfer station to include a recycling operation there. So we'll be watching that carefully and working with them on that. So that could also will be a factor, I think, in our program. So Bill, I don't know if you wanted to add anything. I know you've been at this quite a bit.
No, I appreciate the comments from Jenna. We, just in perspective, based on the $6, we're putting last year we put $93,000 in fees to DKMM from just the city of Delaware through our tipping fees. It gives you an idea of the magnitude of funding we're putting towards it, and that's funded through our refuse program, our residents. What precipitated a lot of discussion, as was pointed out, was the fact that our recycling is no longer as lucrative as it used to be, and our recycler needs to charge more fees now to be able to stay in business, at least our current recycler. That's going to cost us about estimated $130,000 this year under the new contract with them, money that we didn't have to pay out before in order to maintain recycling. So that's what began some of the discussions with, if we're paying these fees, is there a mechanism to reinvest some of that money back in to help our recycling program? Because our perspective is that we are a significant part of recycling in the DKMM district. In Delaware, we have a very high participation rate of our residents with recycling. We want to keep it that way. We want to increase that, but we need help in order to do that. And part of it can be through our general health district, and some of it could be as a stopgap through the grant program that we talked about. If we can offset the cost of some of these vehicles, our vehicles are $250,000 vehicles, these recycling trucks. So certainly between a combination of EPA grant and DKM supporting matching funds could really help the city out in terms of saving us some funding. The General Health District, if you haven't been on their website in terms of the recycling program, it's a great website with a lot of information on there. But there's a real gap between our information we have on our website and what Delaware Health District has, and we want to see a better partnership, and not only making sure the information is united, cohesive, but we need to get that information out to our residents better. Residents just don't go to websites to look information up, but a lot of the questions that are answered in the General Health District is available there. But we need to be able to reach our residents, whether it's by mailers, to give some very specific information. I got on the website again, and there's some really good resident information cards available for the health district that I'd like to make available to our district, to our residents, and would like to do that with the assistance of DKMM and the General Health District, since the health district is supported heavily through these funds, through our $6 per ton, helps pay for that. So I'd like to see a little bit more investment of their resources into our residents to try to further support recycling program. It's very successful in Delaware. Want to keep it there. But I do support the program. I do support the relationship, and encouraged by the amount of dialogue we have had. Maybe it's dialogue we should have had over the past few years, but I think we've kind of gotten past that and want to work together.
Yeah, one more reading I think would be adequate. If there's any members of the public who want to have an opportunity to speak about it, they can. That will meet their deadline, I believe, by March 11th.
Thank you both.
All right, thank you.
Elaine, can you read item number 12, ordinance 1902?
Ordinance number 19-02, an ordinance amending Chapter 529 of the General Fences Code of the City of Delaware.
Mr. Vice Mayor, members of council, if I could have Chief Pijanowski give me an assist on this one. 529 is our ordinances that revolve around regulation of liquor, providing alcohol. This is layered on top of the Ohio Revised Code, which obviously we are bound by as well. The reason this came up is, as you know, we are leasing the space next door, the first floor of the Gazette building, to Cohatch. We do not have I was asked to look and see whether we had a prohibition against having any alcohol on a city building. Other cities have that, including ones where Cohatch is located. Ironically, we do not have that kind of restriction, but we did find a number of laws that would seem to prohibit any form of alcohol being in that building, any building, not just a city building. So what this started out doing was attempting to kind of clean up some of these laws. I think they're on the book since 1967. When Chris Ballard and I were looking at it, we tried to identify the pieces we could strike out with a laser focus to fix the situation next door. And so what you have before you is striking out one word of one section and sections 3 and 4 of another section. So that's kind of what we have now. I'll make it a little bit more complicated than that. I did get some feedback that perhaps we want to strike out the entirety of 529.13. 529.13, my only guess is that this was done to regulate perhaps fraternities. It talks about having, basically if you have a fridge in a club, you can't allow the members to come in and store their alcohol in there for drinking. There's one other thing it could be, but I just don't know. I asked Captain Moore to pull some stats for me, and Chief can chime in here, but we haven't written any citations under this section for quite some time. We do cite college underage drinkers, but we have other sections that we traditionally use for those, because my first instinct when changing a section is not to have unintended consequences. So before I turn over to Bruce, I will say if council is inclined, I can amend this ordinance to just strike out all of 529.13 under the reasoning that it's kind of antiquated and doesn't serve any purpose that we're looking for now. So we can have that discussion, but I wanted to see what Bruce wanted to add, because we do have, fixing this might not fix all the problems, because there still is that other layer I talked about, which is the state liquor laws. So Chief, can you add any insight to this?
Yeah, just reading the council fact sheet with the outcome next door at Cohatch, I'm not sure that eliminating or modifying Delaware's ordinance is going to get there. My suggestion is we actually contact someone from liquor control. We've done a little bit of that work, but the problem that we may run into is the definition of sell for the Ohio Revised Code includes exchange, barter, or gift. So there's some parameters here that are found within the Ohio Revised Code that might preclude some certain behaviors. Now, there are things you can do as a private business owner with alcohol in your business, but there are certain things you can't do. And I think we need to be really careful that we don't change local ordinance thinking we fix that and then have someone run afoul of a state agency that came in to conduct an investigation.
And to add to what Chief is saying, to give you a little bit more process, regardless of whether we change this ordinance, as part of our lease, we are requiring that Cohatch, as the tenant, provide us with a plan as to how they're going to distribute liquor or have liquor, just so we know, so we can look at that. It's kind of trickier than you think, but in our initial research, there are things that you can do and things that you can't do. For example, you have to have invite only, so they couldn't have a party and say, hey, everyone in the city come and have a party, but they could say, hey, we're having a reception and we're inviting people. Also, that porch that they built out there looks really great. You'd think you'd want to have a party out there, maybe have some wine, but that would be a outdoor, and they're not part of the DORA because they don't have a liquor permit. So things like that, we would be able to drill down to and try to tailor it to what we understand to be the state code. But Chief is right. Just because we change this doesn't stop necessarily that layer up there, but it would. We believe that 529.13 might have some unintended consequences if we actually went around and enforced it anywhere anyway. So it might not be bad, but it doesn't cure everything. that fair, Chief?
Yes.
So I communicated with Darren today on this because basically if you read 5.913A1 and 2, it basically says you can't have something in your business that allows you or other people to store alcohol. My guess is, I don't know this for a fact, but my guess is there's probably several offices around town with refrigerators that store beer, wine, et cetera. So I don't see that this serves any real purpose for the city to have this. I'm sure we wouldn't go out and enforce it. So my thought is it's regardless of whether.
I don't disagree with that. I think there, and I've just been reading through some of the liquor control state codes this afternoon, which is really exciting if you ever get a moment. But somewhere in there, I did find there's language about like chests and storage. So I don't know if that's like an old iteration of something with storage, but I agree with you. I don't think there's an issue with someone who owns a business and keeps a fridge in their office and they want to drink a beer at night. That's really nothing that we need to be involved with. I don't think that is the intention of that. I don't know what the intention is, but I think today that's possibly how it reads, probably how it reads.
So do we need to do anything we're setting a public hearing?
The public hearing, I believe, is set for next meeting, is that correct?
At 7:30.
So one thing that would be helpful for the other members of council, and I can change it between first and second reading, or I can change it between second and third if you want to wait till the public hearing, but up for discussion is whether we just want to strike that whole ordinance, and I can also present 2 drafts at the next meeting. It's not that complicated, just strike the whole thing. But I don't want to just go rogue and just do that unless council has thoughts one way or the other.
How would you?
I do not want Mr. Schulman to go rogue.
Thoughts?
I mean, the question is it necessary to have something in our ordinance, which we, for all intents and purposes, we're not walking into private offices and asking to look in their refrigerators if they have.
My inclination is maybe to run that ordinance past someone at Liquor Control or the Department of Commerce and see if they have any idea where that originated from, because they might have some new section of revised code. Or if they say they don't understand it, then I kind of concur. It's something we could probably strike the whole ordinance, but probably
do that first.
Talking to Liquor Control and come back with an answer to that, whether they see any value to that or if they see something that we don't quite understand the meaning or the purpose of that. Whether language has been updated since whenever that was, like 1967, I think.
What I will do, regardless of what the chief and I are able to find out, is in our packet, somehow we will signify that it's under consideration to possibly strike the whole thing, whether we're adopting it or not, because that way the public will have notice that that's something that could happen. So they'll know that if they look at the packet before the meeting, and we can hear feedback on both options if we haven't decided yet.
Item 13.
Ordinance number 19-03, an ordinance supplementing the 2019 appropriations ordinance to provide funding to construct and install a memorial statue to Rutherford B. Hayes downtown at the southwest corner of Sandusky and William Streets and declaring an emergency. Emergency clause that this ordinance is hereby declared to be an emergency measure necessary to provide for the public peace, safety, health, and welfare of the city, and for the further reason to provide for timely payments to the artist creating the Hayes statue, such that the statue will be completed in time to be installed prior to the dedication later this year, and as such will be in full force and effect immediately upon its passage.
So this is a ordinance that will allow us to purchase the improvements on the corner for the Hayes statue, working through the community foundation. So those city funds will be used, but it'll just be and Darren Pike explains this a little bit better.
You want me to take a shot real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
This is twofold. It's a supplemental because anytime we're doing the money, so I think we have to accomplish that somehow. But Ted is right. The money is going to come from the Delaware County Foundation. So this is the other piece of this legislation is it's allowing us, City Manager Homan, to enter that agreement with the county foundation to give us that money. And that agreement, which I believe is attached, has the terms of what that gift is. And that gift is purchase the things for the plaza, do the work and maintenance, and also to pay the sculptor who what's the commission called again? The Bring Rutherford BA's Home? Bring him home?
Hayes comes home.
I knew something. They've had a process to pick the sculptor, so this will allow us to effectuate their pick and pay that gentleman as well. Oh, and the only other thing is I know sometimes council members get nervous about supplementals, but we did put in there that the money can be spent as soon as it's received from the Delaware Community Foundation. So you can feel protected that we won't be using the general revenue fund money for that. Is that accurate?
The other thing we're working on is making sure we have an agreement with the property owner as to the area where the statue is going to go, including the fountain, because the city will be responsible for maintaining that area. So we want to make sure we
And we're still moving forward with that one.
And we received word from that property owner that he prefers it to be as an easement, so I will work on drafting that this week.
Just a comment for Ted. Again, these funds coming through the city's books, but some public funds, subject to audit and all that other sort of stuff. So you do purchase orders, so can't do it right away, but you got to stay on top of whatever's coming in. Make sure we get properly issued purchase orders and everything else so we can process payments.
Any questions?
So this is really another major milestone for this project, and this fall it's going to be quite exciting to see that. So we're asking for council's consideration, favorable consideration this evening, if you so choose.
Move to suspend the rules requiring 3 readings on 19-03.
Second.
A motion by Mrs. Keller, second by Mr. Brown. Please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rourke?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Move to enact the emergency clause on 19-03.
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Keller, second by Mr. Brown.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rourke?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Move for approval of 19-03.
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Keller, second by Mr. Brown.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rourke?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes. It's approved. Thank you.
Thank you.
Read item 14, ordinance 1904, please.
Ordinance number 19-04, an ordinance supplementing the 2019 appropriations ordinance and authorizing the city manager to enter into agreements for the funding, installation, and operation of an electric vehicle charging station and declaring an emergency. Emergency clause of this ordinance is hereby declared to be an emergency measure necessary to provide for the public peace, safety, health, and welfare of the city, for the further reason to provide for the timely design and installation of equipment in accordance with terms of grant requirements, and as such will be in full force and effect immediately upon its passage.
This really is an outgrowth of the city's initiative taken last year to take advantage of some grant opportunities for electric vehicle charging stations, which we currently do not have in any municipal facility. And so this is really an effort to do that. And I know Carolyn Sacurci, who is here this evening, our Sustainability and Watershed Coordinator, along with Bill Farino, who will just give you an overview of the project.
Sure, thank you, Tom. Members of the council, I think we've talked about this before. We're excited to finally get some electrical vehicle charging station opportunity in town. They'll be located in what we call the BP lot. As you pull in, will be the first 2 spaces after the first 2 handicap spots. Those are the ones dedicated. Provided a lot of background information in the fact sheet. I'm going to go through all the details tonight. Caroline really did all the heavy lifting with working with AP and the grants of getting it to the point. We do need a supplemental appropriation because this was not funded through the appropriations ordinance. The grant is for $20,000. Our anticipated cost total is about $27,000. So we're really getting the majority of cost of this, what we call a pilot initiative, paid for through the AEP grant, along with several years of the cloud-based storage and maintenance on these units as well. So it's a good program. Caroline can answer any questions regarding the grant and how that works. It's time sensitive, and we are asking for approval tonight, in that we only have, I think it was 90 days, Caroline, from the time we were notified earlier this month or earlier in January of the grant to actually finish or substantially complete the project in order to receive the grant funding. So we're somewhat on a timeline. This is the first step really tonight, or second step once receiving the grant, to get the funding in place. We go ahead and have the work started, order the parts. There is some language in here regarding how the units would be set up, how fees would work. We can answer any questions regarding specifics of the grant or specifics of the fees or locations that you may have. I don't know, Caroline, you want to add anything? You're going to go, no? A silent partner. Questions?
And yeah, go ahead, George. Yeah, I was just going to say, I have a concern with the location. Pretty much to a T, everyone in this room is either on one of two sides on the parking issue and saying that we don't have enough parking in downtown. So for us to go ahead and set aside 2 green vehicle sites, because these will be placarded probably for EV vehicles only.
Correct.
So, and that being a relatively high use location, that parking lot, I have a concern with utilizing those spaces for that specific function. I would like to see that moved farther out, where we would have, what we currently would have would be our 10-hour parking meters, the quote unquote, oh my goodness, my legs are going to fall off because I had to walk 2 blocks to get somewhere. I think that's where those units should be myself. I thoroughly support the EV initiative, but I just don't believe that's the proper location.
That's a good point. One we've considered. The reason, as I pointed out, that they are there for what I call a pilot initiative is because it's the least expensive place for us to put those, because the power center for downtown lighting is also right there within 30 feet. If we move them to the north, we have more than 100 feet, 150 feet of additional conduit cable, excavation, and sidewalk to disrupt. So it'd be substantially more expensive. The reason I say pilot, they are front row spaces. I think we'll be able to gauge the success of the program or the demand of the program because they are right out in front. If there is a demand for EV charging, we should see vehicles there throughout the day. If there's not, then we're going to see those spaces vacant quite a bit of time, and that will, one, be telling to the community whether we really need to dedicate more spaces for EV or not, and 2, at that point, do we want to consider relocation of those at some point? So I understand the issue, but we did select it because we're trying to reduce costs on a pilot initiative and make it very publicly aware so everyone knows these are EV spots, and it will help us gauge the demand for the program.
And what is the suggested parking time limit on those? Is it 4 hours?
Yeah, we had 4-hour limit on it from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. really your peak demand time. That's really to create turnover during the daytime so they don't become someone's private parking space. If you work downtown, have an EV vehicle, it's not just your personal parking space. So that, but really fundamentally for lunch hour, for your evening hour, dining hours, that's an ample amount of time to be able to come and dine or shop downtown, whether it's lunch or dinner, and then turn the space over. After 8 p.m. to 8 a.m., we really have unlimited amount of time. So if someone is a resident downtown, has an EV vehicle, they're able to park there overnight, and there's no meter charges in the evening, just like a restroom space, there's no parking space charges. If you use that space overnight to charge a vehicle, then you would pay your electric charges for it. But that's 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. is a 4-hour limit, and we had some discussions with users and a supplier of the vehicle. They thought that was reasonable. Charge actually a longer time frame than is used down south in the Columbus area where they have shorter time frames, encourage greater turnover. But again, pilot initiative, we have no idea what the real demand is. 4 hours would help be telling on Friday and Saturday nights if we're seeing vehicles show up there. You will see this appear on an app, so you can find these spots. If you're an EV user, you can see, hey, there's 2 spots in Delaware. It'll tell you if one of them is open or available or not. And so it's exciting that the community that uses EV vehicles they'll be on their radar right away. We'll all be able to see the utility because it'll be very obvious. There'll be a vehicle there and it'll be plugged into the charging station.
Chief, does our current parking restriction ordinance allow us to enforce that, or do we need to make some modifications? We're going to restrict it to EV vehicles only.
I have to look at that. I think if it's restricted parking, we could probably write under restricted parking. But I have to look at this.
Thanks. Any other questions, comments? What's the will of council?
I'll move to waive the rule requiring 3 readings on ordinance number 19-04.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Brown and a second by Mrs. Keller. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Move to enact the emergency clause on ordinance number 19-04.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Brown, second by Mrs. Keller.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
And move for passage of ordinance number 19-04.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Brown, second by Mrs. Keller.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes. Ordinance is approved.
Thank you.
Thank you. Elaine, could you read item 15, please?
Ordinance number 19-05, an ordinance providing for the issuance and sale of bonds in the maximum aggregate principal amount of $8 million for the purpose of paying the cost of various public infrastructure improvements together with all related appurtenances thereto and declaring an emergency. Emergency clause. This ordinance is declared to be an emergency measure necessary for the immediate preservation of the public peace, property, health, safety, and welfare of the city, and for the further reason that this ordinance is required to be immediately effective in order to issue and sell the bonds, which is necessary to enable the city to timely retire the outstanding notes and thereby preserve its credit. Wherefore, this ordinance shall be in full force and effect immediately upon its passage.
Thank you. Mr. Stelzer?
Thank you. Real quickly, I'd like to walk through a timeline, give a little background information on what's being proposed. This bond issuance is connected to the Glen Road construction project in the community authority down there. I passed out at each one of your places there just a real quick summary. I just kind of want to walk through it real quick. Just the timeline for that whole project down there in the community authority. Most of it began back in June of 2005 when we had pre-annexation agreements that we negotiated with several property owners in the area. The city intended to, put in place a major piece of infrastructure, Glen Road, prior to accepting all those annexations. And a part of the pre-annexation agreement called for the construction of Glen Road and for the fact that we were going to put in place a community authority to help pay those costs. A little less than 2 years later, the actual owners had to execute and file a petition with the city, not unlike what was done with the Terra Alta, except we were the catalyst to this one as opposed to what their NCA is going to do to create the NCA. And then it came to City Council. That was approved by City Council in February 2007. And subsequent to that, the new community authority was created. And one of their first tasks was to enter into an agreement with the city, a cooperative agreement related to the construction of Glen Road improvements and how those would be paid back. That was all completed in 2008. The construction work out there was over 2 or 3 phases over multiple years. It started in 2005, and the last major work was done in December of 2011. During that time and since then, the city's taken on the cost of constructing the road, and the community authority is paying back those costs as they collect community authority charges. The charge is 7.5 mils on all properties out there, developed properties in the district. And obviously early on in the early years, there wasn't a whole lot of properties in place, but the charges that have been collected have been applied towards the outstanding amount that the authority owes the city to pay back the cost of constructing the road. In order for the city to construct that, we issued notes and amounts up to $13-14 million at various times. I've listed here those individual note issues over the years and what the interest rate that we paid on the debt for a one-year period. There were a couple others, 14 plus note issuance that I brought to City Council and you approved, because a couple years we did 2 different issues in a given year. But annually, I've come to you and requested that we reissue the notes. Part of the strategy behind that was AA wanted to keep our flexibility out there to ultimately perhaps have a scenario where the authority unto itself could issue debt and take the city out of and pay us off, and then we wouldn't have any debt there. The other advantage was, you can see in the middle part of this, the interest rate that we were paying was quite low, and it just made sense from a total interest payment standpoint. I've got a couple bullet points. There have been 870 residential properties in the NCA area that have been constructed and assessed as of August of last year. I believe I checked with the planning department from about August to the end of the year, there were an additional 79 properties. So things are happening pretty quick out there. But of those 870, 419 have been built and assessed in the last 3 years, which has changed the dynamics a little bit. One of the other reasons why I continued to issue notes was I wanted to make sure there was enough infrastructure in place that if we bonded this debt, there would be cash flow there to pay those bond payments. We're at that point now where I think there's enough development out there that it'll work out from a cash flow standpoint. The 870 properties will pay roughly $688,000 this year in community charges that'll come in to the authority. The authority then remits them to the city in accordance with our agreement. Current interest rates is the important too. The current one-year bond anticipation rate, if we were to reissue these notes, be about 1.65%. And the current 10-year bond rate, if we issue these bonds over a 10-year period, is only 2.294%. And just a couple weeks ago, that was almost 2.6%. So we're in a pretty good rate, favorable rate environment right now. Just as a comparison, the one-year rate 2 years ago was 0.893%, and the 10-year rate was 2.7. So there's a spread there of 1.8%. You know, right now that spread is much less than that, less than about 0.6%. So it makes sense to go out further. We're not really increasing the interest rate. Thus, the timing is really good to go ahead and bond this debt. If council approves legislation, what we'll do is issue a 10-year general obligation bonds in the city's name that'll be callable after 8 years, meaning that we can pay them off prior to the maturity on the bonds. Just from a projection standpoint, based on current collections and anticipated growth, which it's kind of hard to look too far down the road, as anticipated charge will be imposed for an additional 7 or 8 years. If the growth drops substantially, the charge may be in place for another 10 years, but we'll still be able to service the debt. If growth is much higher than projected, and I projected pretty conservatively, there's a chance that the charge could go away in 6 years, which means those residents out there would no longer have to pay that $7.5 million additional property tax. With the agenda, I included a memo kind of giving some background information, including a timeline. The request is to see if council can approve authorize the bond issuance tonight with one reading. Typically if we were doing bonds and borrowing new money, we'd go to at least 3 readings, but we're not issuing any new debt. In fact, we're paying down what exists. So I think it can help us if we move forward, really try to capture this excellent rate environment. And then there's still a process we have to go through to get the bonds issued. But so that's the request. And I'd entertain any questions if you may have them.
Questions?
Just wanted to thank Dean for his work on this, and it looks really good.
We did review it with the
Finance Committee. We did have a discussion at their January 23rd Finance Committee meeting regarding the
and I provided background information about it in my last biweekly report, just knowing that interest in having council's consideration on it.
What is the wish of council on ordinance 1905?
Move to suspend the rules requiring 3 readings on ordinance 1905.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Hellinger, second by Mr. Browning. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Move to enact the emergency clause on ordinance 1905.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Hellinger, second by Mr. Browning.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Move to approve ordinance 1905.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Hellinger, second by Mr. Browning.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes. Ordinance is approved.
Thank you. Now we won't have to come back each year and reissue those notes, so save council some time at future meetings.
Good position to be in. Elaine, could you read 1906? Item 16, please.
Ordinance number 19-06, an ordinance for Carroll's Corporation approving a final development plan for Burger King on approximately 1.14 acres on property zone B3 PUD, General Business District with a planned unit development overlay district and located at 1034 West Central Avenue, US 37.
Mr. Rutland?
Mr. Vice Mayor, members of council, this is a final development plan, and it is the final outlot at the former Bueller Shopping Center that is now transitioning to a different kind of shopping center, but this would complete at least the outlots in that center. It is the westernmost outlot. It is a fairly small outlot containing a house today. It's just a little over an acre. The site is zoned commercial with a PUD overlay. That PUD was updated by City Council and the applicant, Bueller's at the time, in August of 2013. That laid out a specific development text, a preliminary development plan that allowed uses and indeed this outlot. The uses allowed, the applicant has done really an outstanding job of meeting every one of the items contained within that PUD text, as well as taking on the really what we've conceived of as the second phase of the Central Avenue improvements that were required when that text went in. The first phase went in with Panera, and we could talk a little bit about that as we move along. Aerial photograph, should we need to refer to it, but you can see the existing home on the site. You could also see, you can't see, things are happening kind of fast, as Dean said. You can't see the Jackson retail development in this shot, but you can see the access road and the drives that were put in with that phase 1 of improvements. What wasn't put in and left to phase 2 was at this time, with the last outlot, at least with the last outlot, a left turn lane into the site and some other improvements as well. So we've taken the site plan, just put some color to it for you, but the blue represents a little less than a 3,000 square foot Burger King in the main block, and the smaller block are the dumpster corrals. And then you can see the perimeter landscaping and the foundation landscape. And there's a double drive-through on the north side of the site proposed, and one access off of the main Bueller Shopping Center access drive to provide for some access control. Now looking at the site plan are really the Central Avenue improvements with the turn lanes and a little bit of widening. Shows you the 40 space parking lot, in addition to a two-way drive aisle near the front of the building and a one-way around the building. Again, this is a pretty small outlot. It's a fairly small fast food facility, to be honest with you. And Burger King, Carroll's Corporation could talk a little bit about how they operate with respect to traffic as opposed to your typical McDonald's or one of those kinds of fast food facilities as well. One note here is that this is showing a pedestrian connection in this location down to our newly installed pathway along Central Avenue. One condition you'll note in your approvals is that the path actually starts up the private access drive and cuts across. This is the front door really, of the facility. It cuts across in this location, which will start to provide some additional pedestrian access back into the rest of the center too. In terms of proposed elevations, as I remarked at Planning Commission, and I do hear with regularity, this is certainly not the first elevation that staff started with respect to Carroll's Corporation in this project, but it is one we feel very comfortable in recommending approval to you at this time. It's all brick with stone. This is appearing as ledge stone, but it will be the Delaware stone to fit in with the balance of the center and in accordance with the required PUD text. Signage is very limited on all elevations, and temporary signage by condition, should you pass this, would be required to be denoted on the site plan so that if we had to do future enforcement, we could do that. But we know where the temporary signage and the rotating signage would have to go as well. Your Planning Commission did recommend approval at their February 6th meeting unanimously, as do we as staff with the conditions noted. I would point out and just note for you that Amanda Aldridge with Carroll's Corporation has been outstanding to work with all departments, has addressed every question that we've had to this point, including taking on a pretty heavy lift of the second phase of the transportation improvements, which are several hundreds of thousands of dollars just for those improvements here. Of course, we have a TIF in place, and we've tried to do our city piece of that, but for about a 1 acre outlot, that's quite a bit of transportation improvement. So recommend approval, and happy to answer any questions that you might have at this time.
Any questions for Mr. Ruffin? The applicant wish to make a comment? Need you to come up here and give us your address.
Hi, I'm Amanda Aldridge. My address is 917 Harborview, Memphis, Tennessee. Carroll's is very excited about this site, and that's why we wanted to figure out everything with the road improvements and the pretty stone and pretty brick. And I know for Carroll's, and while there are other Burger Kings that you've seen out there with stonework and brick and things like that, but this will be the first of its kind that Carroll's has ever built, new build to this magnitude as far as stone and brick. So we're very excited and proud of it, and would want to fit in and further become a bigger part of the Delaware community.
Questions for the applicant? Thank you.
Thank you.
Just real quickly,
Yes, sure.
the store downtown, is that Carroll's as well?
It is, and it will be remodeled.
I was curious about
for-
that.
That's
Okay.
happening this year.
Okay, is that a full?
That's the goal. I don't know if it will be completed this year, but I know the target is for this year. I need
Okay.
to look and see.
Okay.
I thought we had applied, but it will become a completely different, I think we were calling them 2020 Restaurant of the
Not like this?
Future. It's not going to be quite like this. It's not going to be quite like this, but it will look substantially different. I promise. I promise that. And we're trying to improve lot flow and some other things at that location. But that the capital is.
It's in the pipeline.
It is in the pipeline. Yes.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there people here who want to make comments on this? So could you come to the?
It's a super quick question.
Still need your name and address for the record.
My name is Dustin Nana. I live at 206 Silver Maple Drive. I was just curious, how many jobs do we expect this to create? So, I mean, I'm always excited when new businesses come in and provide opportunities for employment.
Around 40. Yes.
So in the back, got a question? Anyone else?
Hi, my name is Jake Edwards. I'm here with my neighbors from Crestview Drive. We are just, what's that?
Your address.
141 Crestview Drive. And I think 5/6 of our street is in attendance tonight. We just heard about this in the Gazette article earlier this week. I have to say, we're not thrilled about a fast food restaurant going in this, what is essentially some of our front yards. We do have some concerns regarding noise, dumpsters being emptied early in the morning, late at night. Same with light, early in the morning, late at night. I did notice the drive-through will face, look like west, which will be right in our, in our windows at night. We're not thrilled about the smell of a fast food restaurant so close to our homes either. And while there is other development that has taken, gone in place lately, the bank, Panera, they're both low volume and not very intrusive. Same with the gym. There's a lot of traffic in and out, or some traffic in and out, but it's managed pretty well. And we're also concerned about the increase of traffic because east to west through Delaware Centrals, there's a lot of commuting in the morning and late at night. It can already be difficult to turn left, head east on Central. So we just have some general concerns about this development.
Mr. Ruffin, could we possibly make some communication with them in terms of their concerns about lighting and those kinds of things?
Yeah, so a couple thoughts for you, and then I think Amanda could probably make some of her comments, because some of these issues did come up at Planning Commission. I think she's expressed that she's more than willing to work with neighbors and hours of operation for dumpster emptying and that sort of thing. But on the site plan, just to note, there is a pretty heavy tree line on the west side, and most of that is trying to be preserved through construction, in addition to the required 3-foot hedges for lights and such, be they drive-through or parking around parking lots. That's a standard requirement. That's 3-foot at planting. And there is some additional planting that would occur around the northwest corner of the site that doesn't have some existing trees and has a little bit more room. Again, it's a tight site, so there's, I think they're doing what they can with respect to that. Amanda, I don't know if you had any.
Well, it's about traffic and generating traffic. I mean, we do substantially less volume than Panera, unfortunately, but we do. I mean, that's just a statistical fact. So volume-wise, I used to work for a really big company. That one. And our peak, Carroll's peak traffic, I mean, is half of that. I mean, it's just, we do well at what we do, and we're very proud of what we do, but we do not drive the cars and back it up. It's just different. Our model's just a little different, so we don't have that volume. And I know that we have less volume than Panera. And as far as fitness centers, it's a little different. They can have a whole lot of cars, from 5 to 7, 6 to 8. That's true too. That's true too.
Sir, did you want to make some comments?
Yeah.
Can you come? I need
I
to.
was just trying to make sure I said volume. We want to plant a lot of trees. We don't, we want to fit in with the community and get along with everybody. We want to become easier, so everybody happy.
Mr. Vice Mayor, just lights. So lights are all fully recessed and cut off, and we go through a photometric plan to make sure that the light stays on this property. Lights can be shielded as well if you get to that level.
And we will make it so the trash is not coming before 8 a.m. and it's not going past 6 p.m. We can control that.
Good evening. I'll make this quick because it's getting late. My name's Dan Rand. I live at 131 Crestview Drive. That's going to be my front yard. Now, if you still have your slide of the street, how many of you live or use Central Avenue daily? Anybody? Well, then I'm going to open an invitation to you. one morning you can all get your coffee and you can come sit in our driveway at 7 o'clock in the morning. The amount of traffic that goes down Central Avenue is ridiculous. If I don't leave before 7, I can't make a left turn. I have to go right, go up to Lexington, turn around, and come back. I don't know what I saw the volume that this gentleman was talking about for your other projects at 3,000 cars a day. I would venture to guess that it's probably double that. And what you can't see in that picture is that right about where that exit from Bueller's is the crest of a hill. And just past our drive is a school bus pickup. This stops there every morning and every night. Now you want to propose a left turn lane, you'd have to see it to believe it. It'll be a disaster, I'm afraid, because the traffic is set up now to where that when the light at Bueller is red, the one at Lexington is green. So you've always got constant, there's no timing there for people to get out, people to make a left turn. Because I'm sorry, the commuters don't let you out. Period. You will sit there forever. My biggest concern is that traffic. And the fact that if I sit out on my front shirt, that's what I'm going to look at. So it's something to consider. And it's a serious invitation. If you want to see what it's like to live on Central Avenue, come down there. And keep in mind that there are, 3 elementaries, access to the high school and access to the middle school, all off Central Avenue. So there's plenty of traffic. So if you'd like to come down, let me know.
Mr. Farina, do you have a comment at all on that turn lane situation?
The traffic is probably 10,000 cars a day. I do use Central every morning and go right past that. And I would certainly be cognizant to try to let somebody out, as I do in other places down there. I've never seen someone waiting to get out there when I come through at 7 a.m. In terms of the turn lane, obviously, it's to improve safety. Folks do disobey the no left turn right now and go across it. This is, as mentioned earlier, it's part of a larger scale improvement plan along there to make the separate left turns from through traffic movements throughout there. Traffic does back up going eastbound down this hill, can back up all the way to Lexington Boulevard. Trying to get through the Troy Road intersection. It's a very difficult section right there. The overall signals project will help address some of that, but there's just a capacity issue at the peak hour on Central Avenue. There's only one lane each direction. It clears out in half hour, 45 minutes, and you can make your turns after that. But I agree with what the gentleman said. It's very difficult for anybody trying to turn on and off of Central Avenue through that entire corridor, not just Crestview Drive. And the turn lane improvement will certainly at least separate out some of the left turn movements. I'm not sure of the particular restaurant, whether it's a breakfast restaurant and be open that early in the morning for breakfast sandwiches or not, but at least with the turn lane there, it will help alleviate some of the concerns over rear end collisions.
Will those lights there be part of our signal timing project?
Yes, both the Troy Road and the Bueller Drive and Lexington.
You want to comment, sir?
Just a couple of things. My name is Matthew Brown here on 145 Crestview Drive.
You need to sit down so we can get you on tape.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Just to add for the traffic, just even 1 or 2 cars coming out of the existing thing for Ace Hardware, if they turn west, it does make it impossible for you to leave Crestview Drive. And not just Crestview Drive, just to the west of us is Chatham Lane, and then there's also 2 houses across as well that would cause problems for that I could see. That's basically all I have. So.
Sir, can I get your last name again? I'm sorry.
Remlinger.
Thank you.
Another neighbor. Hi. My name is Lucinda Waltenbaugh. I live at 135 Crestview Drive. I agree with my neighbors with everything you say. This is going to be short and sweet. At 7 o'clock in the morning, you cannot go left. I have to go right to go to a traffic light, turn in there and go the other way to go left. And we're just going to look out, sit at our homes and look out, and we'll see the back of the Burger King. It's just the smell, the noise, all the people. We're just not happy. Thank you.
Anyone else? So Mr. Council, will take the second reading, or you want to do it tonight?
Well, I would say do the second reading just because if these folks just found out yesterday or whatever, it's just.
Right. Yeah. Item 17, we've got 3 issues for discussion and recommendation. First is,
let them know what we did.
okay, so we're not going to decide on this tonight, so we're going to take a second reading, take your comments into consideration. Appreciate you being here. The first of the 3 items is no smoking draft legislation for parks.
Yeah, really, this is, these 3 items, we just wanted some general direction from the city council. The first is on the no smoking ban that the Parks Board had recommended. They had recommended a universal no smoking in the parks. The direction was to see if we could modify that in some way. Ted has put together a draft ordinance which would limit, would not eliminate the smoking in the parks, but would eliminate it within 50 feet of a facility or a field. So if that's acceptable to council, we would get legislation before you sometime probably in next meeting or early March to consider that. But we just wanted to know, it was out there. It's something you had talked about before. The Parks Board made the recommendation, and we just wanted to get your direction. Do nothing, outright ban, which council didn't seem to be completely supportive, or this modification. The 50 feet.
So that's what it's 50 feet.
50 feet from, we talked about recreation facilities, and ball fields and things like that.
And it's kind of the honor system. This is not something our police department's going to be out. I mean, if we get complaints, obviously it's going to be driven by that, but it's largely going to rely on the signage, coaches, and others to self-enforce.
And just the general public too. And that's the way a lot of park districts and cities have policed it, is, counting on the public to be the eyes and ears.
So will there be signs indicating?
Yes.
Yep.
So I'm trying to imagine, like, for example, a Veterans Park where it's kind of surrounded by fields.
Mm-hmm.
Where will you be able to smoke in there versus where you wouldn't be able to?
Out drive.
Yeah, I mean, because 50 feet from a field, then 50 feet from a building.
Well, that's my same thought as with the Mingo with the soccer fields. I mean, is there one sign as you come in, or are they posting on?
Yeah, and again, I think what we do is post it with the ordinance, try to summarize the language of being 50 feet from there, but we wouldn't create a boundary or anything like that with signage. I think we just, post it with signs.
That's why it's very imperfect versus just eliminating it altogether or just leaving it the way it is. I mean, it's hard because you have fields that are right next to each other.
And the biggest thing we're trying to curb is when there's an event like a ball field going on and someone decides they want to smoke in the crowd, just so that we could, have some way of enforcing that, we'd like to remove them from that crowd at least, a certain distance so that it didn't affect the crowd. And that's what instituted this whole thing in the first place, was we got some complaints from some of the events that were going on.
I don't think this changed from our prior iteration of it, but it also isn't, if you smoke, you're going to be charged with a crime. If you smoke, you can be asked to put it out or leave. If you refuse to do either one of those, then you could be trespassed out of there by the police department. So it wouldn't be that the police department's going to walk up and write you tickets and things. It's more of a, hey, will you please stop? And they say no, so you realize you're not supposed to, and then the police will get involved. Is that still the way we kind of?
Correct. Right.
I think my personal preference is no smoking at all, but I see the 50 feet as a good compromise.
I think it's good, reasonable.
Yeah, see, myself,
Perfect, but
yeah, myself, I think it should be either leave it the way it is or have no smoking, because the whole 50-foot thing it's imperfect to the point that it kind of goes back to the traffic. What are you really trying to accomplish? Are you trying to make yourself feel good? Or are you actually trying to, make a healthier environment? One or the other. If you're trying to make a healthier environment, ban smoking within the parks. If you just want to make yourself feel good, just leave it the way it is and let people go fisticuffs over somebody smoking that they don't like. I mean, it's unenforceable. No matter what we do, it's unenforceable. But at least if it's black or white, if we leave it the way it is, you have all the right in the world to smoke. If we ban it outright, yeah, anyone could go there and say, you're not allowed to smoke in a city park. Oh, I didn't know. Oh, wait, get out that tape measure. I'm 32 feet away. Oh, I've got to move another 18 feet. Well, it's just silly.
I tend to think that if you post those kinds of signs, what we're trying to keep people from smoking at these events, right? Backgrounds nowhere, but at these events, I think most people are going to honor that when they see a sign that says no smoking within 50 feet or whatever. I think most people are going to honor that.
So do we have to pass a law though that says that, or can't we just put up a sign that says, please don't smoke here? I mean, I thought we already have those.
We have them in our playgrounds, like where the young lungs that play here. So we don't have them around like the ball fields or recreation facilities.
I don't really see a need to, I just don't see a need to pass a law that's not enforceable.
Oh, it is enforceable. It's just not directly going to get people arrested. Basically, the way it'll be enforceable is someone smoking in the crowd, or someone says, please put it out, you're not supposed to smoke here. They say, no, I'm going to do what I want. You can't stop me. Then the police can come and say, you need to put your cigarette or leave. If the person says, no, can't do anything, then they can trespass them out and write them a ticket. So it's just not a primary violation where people are going to start getting arrested for smoking, but it is certainly enforceable. It just takes a couple more steps before you get there. Is that a fair description of how it works?
Or you could even make it a primary offense and let us charge someone, but most of the time we're just going to use that as encouragement to leave the park. It's illegal to smoke under 18 now, very rarely cite people most of the time dealt with. So you can do it either way. I think the value of passing an ordinance would be that most people will voluntarily abide by it, and the ones that don't, we have some options available.
So what would you like us to do? If there's a simple majority, we'll put it on the, if there's not, I guess we'll put it on as legislation and let that go to a public hearing and let the public weigh in on it, and if you'd like. Okay. Massage establishment draft legislation. This is another one that's been out there for a while, and we have provided you some background information on some legislation that Darren and his staff have put together, and just wanted some direction if you wanted that to proceed through the legislative process.
I'd be happy to discuss kind of the approach we took. I'm getting confused as to whether we talked about it before or not, but basically, Chris Ballard and I were trying to weigh burdens of regulation and versus and unintended consequences versus protection and addressing the risks that were brought up by the folks who were interested in this kind of legislation. So what we came up with was sort of a middle ground, differing from what other places have done, in that we put right now a massage parlor kind of fits under a couple different potential uses under our business zoning code, and it's kind of gets shoehorned in. What we are recommending doing is explicitly saying it is allowed in the business district. However, asterisk that with, but in order to get that zoning occupancy, you need to have the licensure from the state or be exempted out, chiropractor, doctor's office, that sort of thing. So it will, I believe, ensure that any new massage parlors that come into the city have that certification that we wanted. The side effect that we kind of think is nice about this approach is we don't have to worry about any accidental impacts on legitimate businesses that are already in the city because they already have their certificate of occupancy. So this will protect us for future things because they'll have to come in and get it. But the folks that are in there right now, we don't have to worry about accidentally putting someone who hasn't done anything wrong out of business. So we kind of thought that was a good approach going forward. But before we threw that on the agenda, we wanted to give council an opportunity to ask us about it and see if this is something they wanted to pursue. I think we mentioned this last time it came up, but we did do some just digging in our stats, and we haven't actually had any arrests for prostitution or human trafficking of that nature in Delaware. So it's kind of maybe a preventative measure, but we aren't currently having a lot of arrests and things right now. But that doesn't mean don't do it. It just means it's hard to figure out exactly what we're trying to solve other than preventing this kind of activity from coming into the city. I'd be happy to try to answer any questions. I think Dave was very instrumental in coming up with this approach, so he can probably chime in if I missed something.
I agree with everything you said. I think another advantage of this approach is that from an administration standpoint, it already fits into sort of our standard practices for issuing zoning certificates anyway. There's an extra step of making sure there's a certificate or licensure from the state, but that's okay. We do that with some other uses as well. But it's not creating a brand new process or something like that, at least from our perspective. So we think it's our ability to administer this is going to be, we're going to be able to do that.
I did receive some emails from some constituents not understanding why it would not be retroactive. So I would anticipate during the public comment, we'll definitely be hearing that perspective as well. And I don't know, I know this place that started this whole thing, Chief, you said, never been any issues. And I don't know whether at that public meeting, the police can issue some sort of report that says, we've investigated, and nothing going on.
We've investigated, there's nothing.
Right.
Can't tell you a lot of details of what we've done.
Which I understand.
But we run a lot, and I will tell you, we continue to be wary.
Sorry.
We continue to be wary of that behavior in the city, and we do things to know what's going on in the city, and I have not seen anything that concerns me about that location.
So I would just assume there's going to be some opposition to the legislation. So
to not going far enough, you mean?
Yeah.
Okay.
Not going far enough, right?
And the one thing I do want to be careful of, and council has been very good about this, but we certainly don't want to throw out accusations against, and you haven't, but we don't want to throw accusations about particular business, and we don't want to pass laws and say we're doing this because of this particular one, especially when we have no real evidence of doing that, because that could open us up to other issues. And council's been very good about that, but always keep that in the back of your mind. And we tried to do this as a broader issue in preventing it. So I think we must keep that in mind.
Chris, this was kind of your issue. Are you moving ahead with
Oh,
this?
absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. All right. And we'll tee it up for probably some of the March meetings. We want to give an ample notification to, affected businesses and whatnot to speak. The last item is the proposal by Main Street Delaware that came towards the end of last year, early January. Susie Bibler, Executive Director of Main Street, is here this evening. You've received the proposal, which I think has some merit, should probably be considered, but I wanted to get the direction from council. And essentially, Main Street is asking for consideration of using the former engineering building as its Main Street offices. They've laid out a couple of scenarios within their letter, which might be an approach, but the upshot would be the city's plans to take that building down and create a parking lot there and its own welcome center would not move forward if you decided to consider doing something with Main Street. So I just wanted to kind of get general reaction to that, and if you think there's an interest in at least starting some discussions with them. They might not prove fruitful, but I do think it's something that we'd want to consider. Because if we do move forward on the other end of the spectrum, which is actually to take the building down, we have to go through a lengthy public process with the Historic Preservation Commission and probably override their
what I would expect to be a no vote to take that building down. I think that parking lot project still has merit. I can kind of see the wisdom of both, but ultimately I'd like to get your feedback on what the Main Street has put forward.
Me personally, I thought Main Street's proposal had some merit to it, but I'm still 50-50 on which way to go. So I think we should definitely have more discussion about it. What I'm curious about though is why does Main Street have interest in that building compared to your current location?
And they are here, so maybe Zach Price and Susie could come forward and discuss that. Sat patiently.
Good evening, Vice Mayor and members of council. It feels like it should be morning at this point, but thank you for having us. We are extremely excited about this opportunity, just to even get a conversation started. We are interested in the building for a lot of different reasons as we continue to succeed at what our organization is meant to do in the community. We see some challenges staying in the current space that we're at and being able to grow our staff properly to meet all of the different challenges that we have in a growing community like ours. With the advice from very knowledgeable board members such as Zach Price, who is an architect. He has looked at the building. We've all visited the building. Thank you for letting us in. And we see merit as we move forward. It's a great partnership. I think it can kind of achieve not only our problem with outgrowing our space, but also being a good partner and having a welcome center with the possible use of a bathroom during our normal office hours. Would you like to say anything? Zach Price?
Yes, Zach Price. My address is 17 North Sandusky Street. As Susie mentioned, as an organization, we have outgrown our current space. We are no longer able to even fit our board for board meetings in that facility. And we're actually really excited to take the organization to another level. And with that, there's a number of service offerings that we are interested in. And we are starting to engage property owners downtown. We've met with some other organizations, including the Columbus Special Improvement District and the Short North Special Improvement District, to hear about the other service offerings that they currently offer. And if that's something that we can do, even though our current space is too small, it will definitely be too small at that time.
Well, at least we have some discussions, unless council tonight says we're not interested. I mean, I think you need to at least explore it, see what the terms might be. Obviously, we fund their agency. I mean, it can not the entire agency funding, but a considerable amount comes from the city. So I think obviously that contribution needs to be taken into consideration, the value of the building. I don't think we want to sell it. It would be my opinion to hold on to it because I still think it's an important piece of property for the city. But the idea of the Welcome Center is logical, I think, for Main Street to consider. We've also talked about the CVB possibly playing a role in that as well. That's a more preliminary discussion, but something that we have raised with them. They have similar missions in that regard, so that there might be something worth talking about in that level as well. So,
Open to discussing it.
I'm definitely open to discussing it.
okay, then we will we'll follow up and get a meeting scheduled and see what we can go to the next step.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Really quickly, a shout out to Chief Donahue and all of the work he has put into the pre-hospital care admissions program. You probably read about that in the Gazette last week. The County Board of Commissioners took some action in regards to consideration of forming a countywide board. We had sent out some previous communications to that, but to the work of John on that, I commend him for that. That's a lot of work went into that, and I think it's going to result in a lot of important improvements for our county and for our city in terms of pre-hospital care admission relative to EMS. And we'll give you more information about that at some point. Annual employee breakfast went well and had a number of kind of a record turnout, which was great. We are getting ready for the retreat on the 16th. We're looking at bringing in a facilitator who we used a few years ago, who will provide a more kind of structured, productive morning, because we only have the morning really through lunch, and that's it. I'll send out, there will be probably, if we do that, a pre-retreat survey, just getting some feedback from City Council on what you're looking to accomplish for that. Community Day this Saturday at Ohio Wesleyan University, if you're able to do that. And the Liberty Castings meeting, we had a meeting with Liberty Castings and some of the members of Sustainable Delaware, and that went quite well. Councilman McKellar was there, Councilman Browning, Mayor Riggle was there, and I think it was very productive, so that was good. And then we're going to send out some information about street lighting changes. We have to make changes to our street lights per the recommendation of Bill and his staff. Right now, we put our street lights up on each side of the street. Due to some changes with AEP, Bill is recommending that we go to one side of the street only, which changes the look and feel of our city streets and the vertical improvements we have with lights and trees. But I guess you can give them the 30-second version of why that's important and why we should do it on one side of the street.
Sure, so the mandate from AEP, not one side, but that we have to meter our street lighting. That actually helps us in the future because we'll only be paying for the actual cost versus the estimated cost. But it's going to require us to put all infrastructure for lighting in the front yards. And right now, to put lighting on every other side of the street, every other light, would almost be a double in enough amount of infrastructure we have to put in the ground and then maintain. And with the limited funding we have for anything from A to Z with transportation, we thought it best to, keep the cost down, put them on one side of the road. There's, opposing opinions on whether that will really be noticeable or not. I think people will notice the change from high pressure sodium to LED lights more than they're going to notice, hey, how come all lights aren't on, how come they're on one side of the road? Especially with the way David does a good job with designing our subdivisions, laying out sinuosity, curvature to the road. When you're looking down a road, I don't think you'd be able to tell what side of the road the light's on when you look through a subdivision. So I think it'll be a minor impact. If we don't like it in 2 or 3 years, we can always say, hey, we made a big mistake, but we really don't think we are. We're just trying to control costs right now and not add a bunch of infrastructure that we really can't afford to maintain at the current point. So Carrie Fortman's memo lays out in detail some of those facts, but that's our final recommendation. We need that to be able to move forward. We have over a dozen subdivisions right now waiting for our new standard to be adopted so they can go ahead and get their final lighting design done and continue to move forward.
So that's all I have.
Visited the Citizen Academy last Thursday. We did a great job, great, proud, and I'm just happy to receive an invite.
Nothing, thank you.
Nothing, thank you.
Speechless.
I have nothing as well. With that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. So moved. We are adjourned at 9:18.
Covered a lot of ground.